Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, January 28th, 2018. We're not dead yet. That's good news. And we ain't licked yet either. Dang it. Dalganic, gag, nabbit. What else can I say that is something homespun about that? All right. Well, it's a hell of a day. And it was a hell of a day yesterday, too. And, of course, most of the hell of yesterday came after the show was off the air. But we probably should have predicted what was going to happen. I will say that one of the things I regret about finishing yesterday's show, not getting to during yesterday's show, was that I made mention of a Benji Sarlin tweet that I think, it wasn't absolutely essential for yesterday, but it probably helped set the table, would have helped set the table for yesterday. Of course, I'm talking about having gotten off the air, and a couple hours later, we find out that Anthony Kennedy is set to resign from the Supreme Court, effective July 31st, I think, and so that's actually, pretty much right around the corner. It's essentially right now, and they'll be looking for their replacement starting right now. And I'm sure Republicans have in mind that the only fair thing to do would be to confirm someone very quickly, even though, yes, okay, we all know that there's tremendous hypocrisy. I wouldn't spend any time at all really trying to get Mitch McConnell or any Republican to live under the same rule. They'll just claim it's a different rule anyway. And even if it was exactly the same rule, they would ignore it. And so, it doesn't do anybody any harm to put out there that there is hypocrisy. And I suppose it's possible that you might reach somebody with a tweet who didn't realize, hey, that is hypocrisy, and will change their minds. But, we're not going to be able to prevent any of this from happening, certainly not by tweeting that it's hypocrisy and expecting Mitch McConnell or anyone else to be ashamed of that and change their minds about how to approach the nominations. Benji Sarlin's tweet, which I did not get around to reading, was very interesting, I thought. He had posited this. He said, if you want to know why Democrats, don't vote based on judges, and we all exhorted everyone to vote based on judges. So did Donald Trump, of course, and it seems to work very well for Republicans, but not all that well for Democrats. In the main, I think people who are voting Democratic, if you ask them about whether or not they cared about the judges and whether that was a critical issue to them and that they voted, they made sure to vote Democratic, those who are regular voters, because of judges, they would all say yes, but it's not top of mind the way it is for Republicans. If you want to know why Democrats don't vote based on judges, but Republicans do, he says, look at this chart. So look at it. Go ahead. I know you can't see it. It says, he continues, though, by saying, even as the court moved further right in the Roberts era, Democratic approval of SCOTUS. This is a Supreme Court job approval by political party is what the chart is. Even as the court moved further right in the Roberts era, Democratic approval of SCOTUS surged on the Affordable Care Act decision and others, as Republicans' approval of the court plummeted further. And it's an interesting phenomenon. I find that to be a very valuable observation. The more conservative and ever more conservative Roberts Court did have these anomalous moments, and they shouldn't have been anomalous because that's how the decisions should have gone, but maybe that's what made them an anomaly. In the Roberts era, lots of decisions that precedent and reality tell you that they should come out this way, and their party tells them it should come out a different way. We prefer a different result, and voila, they get that different result from their Republican-appointed judges. And so, like we were saying, though the court grew on the whole more conservative, big, splashy stories about an anomalous outcome restored the faith of Democrats in the court as an institution. Not Armando's faith, maybe not your faith, but in general. Hooray! Something. They were persuaded by what was right and true and just, and taking a look at real history and the real outcome of say, striking down the Affordable Care Act, forced the justices' hands here, and they did the right thing. My faith in the Supreme Court is restored. Whereas, for Republicans, their faith in these institutions were shattered for whatever reason, and it became more important than ever for them to vote for someone who would appoint justices crazy/fake conservative enough to give them different outcomes, whereas the rest of America said the court is doing its job. We wish it would do its job more often, perhaps, but in the big issues that capture our attention, it looks like the court is functioning, and so it's less of an issue for us. And I think that's an interesting thesis. I don't know how I would test it, but it has the ring of truth, and so I wanted to share it. Now I only wish I had shared it yesterday, so that when the big news came out, you would have been prepared to say, maybe this is the explanation. Maybe this is exactly why we can't get people to do this. And of course, we've waited to get to a huge crisis situation before making it a priority. Although, again, I don't know how those of us who listen to the show will not have any idea why people don't understand this inherently and understand things correctly so that they can vote accordingly, and they wait until things get out of control to prevail on their fellow voters to do something, to do the right thing, and to get their act together. I'm not certain why that is. We'll conduct a poll and find out why everybody is so blind to this stuff, but then they're not likely to give us the correct answer because they're embarrassed. Anyway, Greg Dworkin is here with us. We've got lots to go over, and we'll give some time over to what, if anything, can be done. And don't get your hopes up. But anyway, here's Greg. Good morning,
Hey,
Greg.
good morning.
Hi.
Because it's always a good morning, because, what's the alternative?
Yes, right. Well, I don't know what else to say, and there's really
I got a few things to say.
no way for us to just simply say neutral morning to one another. Okay.
No, absolutely. In fact, yesterday, I would say
We're
the
an
last
optimistic
week
people.
and certainly the last 3 days have just been awful. And the thing that it does is it reinforces the pit in the stomach we had when Trump was elected. This was the worst fears that we had.
Right.
And it's just horrible to actually see it play out. And I'm not just talking about Kennedy retiring. I'm talking about the baby jails. And throwing 3-year-olds into court by themselves to justify their immigration status, even though they don't speak English.
Right. And many 3-year-olds who are born here don't really speak English all that well either.
So, it's just a horrible situation. And then, of course, reaffirming the travel ban and saying that America is really the country that interned the Japanese in 1944. That wasn't an accident.
Yeah. Well,
so
that's where we are.
how do you put that together with your observations about Benji Harlan's tweet? And I would go back to something that we've talked about for a bit, and that is looking at the political scientists Dave Hopkins and Matt Grossman. That's 2 N's at the end of Grossman.
Oh, okay.
Who wrote a thesis about the asymmetry of the parties.
Yes.
Where the idea is that the Republicans are ideologic, and the Democrats are situational group interest, and they're just different. And because they're different, you can never expect things to play out the same way, only the other side. This is where the both-siderism just completely collapses. Well, if the Democrats were in that position, they would do just the same. No, they wouldn't. They're completely different parties.
Yes.
And they have completely different approaches to things. And the chart you mentioned about how they look at the Supreme Court is, pretty clear. The Republicans want the Supreme Court to do everything they want ideologically, and the Democrats take a win here and a win there and say it satisfies our group interests, so of course we're okay with it.
Yeah.
Like, affirming gay marriage is real and the law of the land, at least temporarily,
Right.
Until the Republicans get through with it. But the point is, and Roe v. Wade. The court did these things. These things are important to our constituency group, so we're okay with the court, even though we don't like it when they don't do these other things. That's the way the Democrats look at it. And the Republicans say, well, if you don't give us everything, then we hate you.
Yeah. Well, they're Gimitarians.
Right.
So, yeah.
How the new health care bill confirms the asymmetry of the parties. This was back in March of 2017. Mac Grossman and I, writes Dave Hopkins, write a fair amount about health care in our book Asymmetric Politics because it's a political issue that represents a particularly effective example of our main thesis. The Democratic Party is organized as a coalition of social groups. The Republican Party is controlled by an ideological movement. Mm-hmm. And you can see that in the House, where the Freedom Caucus certainly controls everything that goes on.
Yeah. Well, that's...
there should
yes.
be, but there won't be an immigration bill if the Freedom Caucus doesn't agree.
Right.
The Speaker should say, well, screw that. Let's just get Democrats and we'll vote together and we'll put you in your place and make you realize you don't run everything. But they don't. Why they don't is subject to debate. I think it's a huge mistake on their part. They say no for the same reason that you can't convince Mitch McConnell that he's being a hypocrite. He doesn't care. It's all about power and winning. And that is the only thing that matters to the Republicans. You know, we've said that for a long time. It's one of the reasons I've hated the Republican House, but it's just totally on display. Anyway, Grossman and Hopkins, Hopkins writes, now that the House Republican leadership has released its health care reform proposal, the long-promised plan to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, which ultimately failed, thank you, John McCain, it's clearer than ever that the two parties are fundamentally different in character. The Democratic Party is controlled and composed of a number of discrete social groups. Nobody controls the Democratic Party. We're not an organized party. We're Democrats. Each of which pressures party leaders to support and enact policies designed to ameliorate specific perceived problems faced by the group. For decades, Democratic constituencies have demanded that their party act to provide health care benefits to vulnerable populations, a goal that was addressed by the creation of Medicare and Medicaid in the 60s, CHIP in the 90s, Affordable Care Act in the aughts, 2009, 2010. By and large, Democrats are less concerned about the mechanics by which a policy is implemented than they are about the real-world effects of that policy. For example, the Affordable Care Act didn't reflect an overarching ideologic vision for the nation's healthcare sector. It was designed to minimize disruption. So in order to increase its chance of passage through Congress, it made sacrifices. Thank you, Joe Lieberman.
Right.
Who got rid of the
public
option.
Yes.
While extending insurance and other benefits to a greater proportion of the public. So practically speaking, does it help you get insurance? That's what's important to Democrats. Democratic leaders worked for years to negotiate compromises with a range of powerful stakeholders in order to develop a bill that had a chance of passing into law in order to achieve at least a degree of policy-making success. By the way, they also tried to make sure that it didn't break the budget.
Right.
No credit from Republicans for it. I would point out, as many others have, and that sidebar there, interesting argument I saw on Twitter yesterday between Jonathan Cohen, Citizen Cohen, and Ron Fournier about how Democrats never really care about balancing the budget. And Jonathan Cohen said, well, why should they? Every single time they try to do it, they never get any credit for it. That's what they did with the Affordable Care Act. It was clunky and messy the way it was is because they didn't want to break the budget. It's a lot easier to say, well, let's just give health care to everybody and screw the budget. They do that for the military all the time. That's the way the Republicans do it.
Yeah, true, right, good point. And
so why not just do that? Well, because Democrats are responsible. They're trying to make sure that things actually work. But if you're not going to get credit for it politically, either from your Republican opponents or from the voters, then what's the point?
Yeah.
Do it. Well, that doesn't help if nobody elects you.
That's true too. Well, you know, I'm not 100% certain where. I'm trying to think of where the free advice consultants would come down on this. I mean, on the one hand, it doesn't matter if you don't get elected, and on the other hand, they seem so interested in garnering that credit.
Yeah, so, you know, their way of doing it is do the opposite and just claim they did, right? You know?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to do something that's totally going to break the budget. We'll pass this horrible tax relief, which is really tax relief for the 1%, and it won't help anybody. But and it'll also bust a budget, but we'll claim it doesn't, and so we're done.
Yes. That is easy. I like the simplicity.
They take the easy approach. Democrats take the hard approach. And what I'm saying is, from the public's point of view, yeah, they don't like the tax bill, and that Republicans aren't getting the credit that they think they deserve.
Yes,
and the reason they think they deserve the credit isn't because they crafted a good bill. They're really annoyed that their messaging isn't working.
Yeah, we have said that we are due credit here. So
why
is
are you
happening?
not crediting us when we told you that we should deserve credit? We just don't understand why you're not giving us the credit we said we deserved.
Yes.
Not that we worked to deserve.
I'm sorry.
So,
on.
Dave
Did
Hopkins,
you hear me?
I'm just trying to illustrate the difference between the parties.
Yeah.
To put it simply, if you passed a bill that didn't do what you said it was, Democrats would feel bad. If you passed a bill that didn't do what you said it was, Republicans would say, screw you, we passed the damn bill. Now shut up.
And that would be news because they don't pass bills a whole lot.
But they don't. But when they do, they're disastrous. And that is the basic difference between the parties right there. The Republicans, as one might observe these days, work differently, Hopkins writes. And this, again, was about the health care bill. The bill that Paul Ryan and his congressional allies have released is not the product of extensive deliberation among interest groups, health care providers, or policy experts. If you remember, no regular order. They didn't actually ask people and stakeholders what they thought. They just got together in a back room and wrote it as quickly as possible in like 3 days.
They didn't even ask members of Congress what they thought.
No, they just had the committee chair and a couple of aides do it, probably the aides. Nor is it designed to achieve a particular outcome with respect to the quantity or quality of coverage available to the public. Instead, the legislation is primarily motivated by the goal of reducing federal involvement in the provision of health care to the extent it's politically possible, repealing individual mandate, deemed constitutionally coercive by contemporary conservative ideology, and imposing significant cuts to the federal Medicaid program, which, of course, they're still up to. Much has been made of the fact that the House plans to begin legislative action without a score from the CBO. This decision supposedly reflects the desperation felt by Republican leaders to push the bill through, as well as an expectation that the CBO's numbers when they come will be awful.
Yeah.
I'm summarizing. But the lack of interest in the CBO score also demonstrates what the central purpose of the bill actually is. For Democrats, the point of enacting the ACA was to increase the number of Americans who had health insurance. Any legislation that failed to significantly reduce the ranks of the uninsured was, by that standard, not worth passing. And that is, by the way, why we keep criticizing it after it was passed. It didn't do everything because we wanted to do everything. I mean, we try to craft legislation that'll actually do stuff. Validation from outside experts that the ACA would indeed fulfill the goal of coverage expansion was necessary in order to maintain party support, he says. Republicans, in contrast, are much more indifferent to the question of what effect their own replacement bill would have on the number of insured Americans. An unfavorable CBO score would be politically damaging, to be sure, but less likely to influence their evaluation of the inherent merits of the legislation. This is a party that when they don't like the way people score things, they invent new scores.
Yes, that's
true. They
true.
do that all the time. Oh, well, we don't like that. We're not going to have you do it anymore. You guys keep giving us the wrong answer. We'll score it ourselves. We'll be the Rand Paul organization of ophthalmologists that just comes up with their new standards because screw you. They really are the screw you party. Some liberals have responded to our characterization of the Republican Party as fundamentally ideological by arguing that Republicans don't really adhere to a coherent value system, but rather merely do the bidding of wealthy citizens and big corporations. But the Ryan bill can't really be explained on that basis. The rich do benefit by receiving a tax cut, but if Republicans only cared about that issue, they'd have chosen to pursue a politically easier path of cutting taxes on the wealthy while leaving health care alone. And they sort of kind of did that when they put their tax bill together. So that one you could argue is at the bidding of their masters. But the health care bill was ideological. Now, it happens their masters are ideological, so they get blurred. But, the Mercers and the Kochs have something in mind when they give you money, so does Adelson. Similarly, it's far from clear that insurance companies are getting much out of the Ryan bill. In fact, the repeal of the individual mandate might well lead to a market death spiral. It didn't for various and sundry reasons, but no thanks to the Republicans. But perhaps the strongest current evidence in favor of our argument about the differences between the parties is the unique power of ideologically purist activists and pressure groups within the GOP.
Yes. Although we have our own, but they're not quite the same.
They're They're not the same. They're asymmetric.
Yeah,
In what
right,
is
right.
surely the biggest political
That's
news of the day, one conservative organization after another, Club for Growth, Heritage Action, Freedom Works, Koch-funded Americans for Prosperity, has announced its opposition to the Ryan bill, claiming it doesn't go far enough in repealing ACA. Of course, these groups' criticisms only make it more likely Ryan's reforms will fail and the ACA will remain in place. And as we argue in asymmetric politics, it's time to devote more serious attention to the fact that the increasing power of the conservative movement and growing electoral success of the Republican Party over the past few decades has not yet come close to achieving the major retrenchment to domestic policy that the American right has nominally dedicated to pursuing for most of the last century. That may change with Kennedy's retirement, but at the time, a lot of this stuff was being stopped by one person or two people. That still could be if Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski actually decide that they're not ready to overturn Roe v. Wade, but that remains to be seen. When Republican office holders repeatedly shrink from risking the popular backlash that would naturally arise from large-scale implementation of their ideological commitments, and that's, I would add, what we need to do in terms of voting in November, which is really our only recourse. Note how the House GOP has acknowledged that simply repealing the ACA without replacement would invite electoral disaster. The unelected elements of the right respond by attacking them for betraying the Republican Party's conservative principles.
Yes.
And then they threaten their defeat in primary elections. And regardless of where one's sympathies might lie, observers across the political spectrum should be able to agree that this is not a fertile political environment for the prolific enactment of sound public policy. And that's what's been happening, because you can't, like you said, they can't pass anything. Look what they did with immigration.
Right.
And had they passed something on immigration, it wouldn't have been good.
No.
So you have the least worst alternative of I hope it fails, because what they're trying to do is even worse.
That appears to be the case. Remarkably enough, this has Armando convinced that you are right today. I don't know if if you caught that.
Because I don't know why.
I'm not certain. We could check with him and figure out why. He's actually dying to join us today. I wanted to make sure we got through this important piece. But let's set up the rest of your segment here. And
okay. Well, there's a lot to talk about in terms of the courts, and Armando's the one to do it. But what I don't want to lose track of, and then I'm going to give you a fun one. What I don't want to lose track of is this piece, tweet by Jacob Soboroff last night.
Okay.
If facilities are not available, DHS asks the Department of Defense to build tent camps for 4,000 people in 3 locations: Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, or California, and they want Department of Defense to house and care for an alien family population of up to 12,000 people. They want the Department of Defense to house 2,000 within 45 days. They're not putting the kids back with the parents. Of course, they can't, because they already deported the parents.
Right.
I don't want to tell you that that's what they did. And even though there's a court order that says they have to do it, they're not going to do it because they just say, well, it's too hard. Sorry.
Yes.
And then the plans are, well, and by the way, if the courts say we can't just take the kids and the babies and put them in jail the way we want to, then we're going to build concentration camps for the immigrants, and we'll put them there.
Yes, and if you have a problem with it, take us to court, and then we'll change the composition of the court and win.
Right. And so that's where we're at right now, and that's why it's such a dark day and why it's such a dark week. It's all part of the same thing.
Yes.
And again, if you ask Mitch McConnell, well, but what about this? And he'll say, well, we're winning, so shut up.
Yep, pretty much.
Elections have consequences. And so why don't the Democrats just do the same thing as the Republicans and just block everything? Well, there's 2 major reasons. Right?
Yes.
Major reason number 1 is we're not the same party, but major reason number 2, which is far more important than major reason number 1, just like with DACA, and we had this discussion about closing the government down over DACA, we don't have the votes.
Well,
you can yell at Chuck Schumer all you want to. You don't have the votes. Now, I would argue, as E.J. Dionne today does, who cares? Do it. There's some things that are worth going to the mat on, and this is one of them.
Yes.
And if you can't go to the mat on LGBTQ issues, and if you can't go to the mat on Roe v. Wade, then you, the Democratic Party, which is made up of constituent interest groups who have these particular issues first and foremost in their mind, then you failed as a party. So I don't think that Schumer has much choice. It's going to be bad and it's going to work out poorly, but I think they have to fight.
Yeah. Well, they definitely do have to, and they don't have the votes now, but there's probably not much prospect of getting the votes if they don't let people know that they're worth giving the votes
what
to
I would
them.
do, I would do a two-pronged thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think the major thing to do is Alaska and Maine citizens, that's you, Bill, and your friends, and everybody you know, has to put a tremendous amount of pressure on Susan Collins, who does buckle under pressure.
Yes, rarely in our favor, but I mean, really, there's not much else to do. I mean, the shortest possible answer is, there just aren't enough Democrats to do anything with Democrats alone. There's a unique situation before us that makes it possible to do it without the affirmative assistance of more than perhaps just one, maybe 2 or 3, just to be safe, Republicans. But there isn't anything that Democrats can do if Republicans decide, I cannot break faith with the party here.
Right.
So
the other thing
basic problem.
for people who are in close races, and depending upon where you are, you as a senatorial candidate may have to make this an issue. In the fall, I'm running against somebody who wants to get rid of Roe v. Wade. Let's be clear about this.
Yeah.
All right?
I don't know why you wouldn't want to do that.
You know what? If the
That's
American
true.
public votes to do it anyway, I really don't know what to say. But if you don't make that case and you lose, that's terrible.
Yes. Well, you certainly don't want to leave that case lying out there. I mean, it's perfectly true and honest and real and persuasive. And I guess if it's not, then okay, you can go back to the drawing board. And then there are, of course, lots of issues about who actually gets to come out and vote. You know, even if you exhort them to do so and convince them that they should. But, you know, at this point, going forward with electoral strategy, there's simply no other thing to do. All right, well, we will take our break. Let me see if we can add Armando to our call during the break. That's when it makes sense. And we'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Okay, welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We have Armando with us successfully. We have engineered it correctly, I believe. And we're all here. Now the only question is, how can we rig it up so that Armando can see the links that Greg is talking about? And we'll probably all talk slowly and clack on the keyboard so that we can engineer it while we're doing it. Okay. What were we saying again? What happened yesterday?
Well, you know, there was all this
Oh, yeah. All right.
Supreme Court stuff. So This is a funny article. Not funny, haha, but ironic, sardonic.
Okay.
Called The Distress of the Privileged.
All right. Let's
In a
see.
memorable scene from the 1998 film Pleasantville, in which two 1998 teenagers are transported into the black and white world of a 50s TV show.
Okay.
The father of the TV Perfect Parker family returns from work and says the magic words, "Honey, I'm home," expecting them to conjure up a smiling wife, adorable children, and dinner.
Yes. Okay.
But this time it doesn't work. No wife, no kids, no food. Confused, he repeats the invocation as if he must have said it wrong. After searching the house, he wanders out into the rain and plaintively questions this strangely malfunctioning universe. Where's my dinner? And this author here uses this as an example of what's called privileged distress. Not to discuss old movies, but the whole idea is the world used to fit you like a glove, but it no longer does. And increasingly, you find yourselves in unfamiliar situations that feel unfair or unsafe. And your concerns used to take center stage, but now you have to compete with formerly invisible concerns of others. And if you're one of the newly visible others, it all sounds whiny. But if you're the privileged one who's losing their privileges, you feel distress.
Yes.
So obviously it has salience in terms of discussing why in the world would people actually feel gleeful about all the stuff that happened in the last couple of days.
Yeah. You think you're going to get your way, or you have economic anxiety, let's say.
Yeah, let's say. Hey, Armando, you on?
He is. I mean, he's connected. That's the
He's still working on connecting, so.
Yeah.
I am on.
All right.
Yeah.
See?
There he is.
We were going to say, he's not on.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
You're wrong. I am on. Oh, see, I knew he was there. Okay.
We're doing a whatever commercial that is.
Okay. Yeah, right. We hear you now.
Yeah, I think a lot of I thought Greg's theme, and it's something I just want to reconnect to a theme that David has, frankly, since I've known him, made. This question of norms and rules, and you can't do that, and Democrats, of course, never can do that, but Republicans who supposedly can't do that do it anyway. And Greg, all the things you were talking about this morning is exactly that. Well, I can say that tax cuts are going to pay for themselves, and they're not, but who cares? I'm a Republican.
Yeah.
But we have to do pay-fors. How are we going to pay for our big health care bill? Well, we're not. We can't say that.
They never say we have to do pay-fors. They say you have to do pay-fors.
Right.
Exactly. And it goes to, and Mitch McConnell, and then I just was enraged just before I came on by Aaron Blake, who is terrible. You guys know this. He's absolutely terrible. And he's like, hey, how can you say this about Mitch McConnell? Mitch McConnell meant only if the president's office is open. He didn't say anything about the Senate being up for election. That's so
you mean
ridiculous.
Why McConnell isn't a hypocrite? Of course he is. McConnell doesn't care, which is the bigger point.
Yeah.
Well,
but
I
say
get
that he's a hypocrite,
but
you
it's
have to
worse
be
than
some kind of weird inside the beltway, I have my head in the sand kind of person.
No, but it's worse than that. He just created this argument. No, Mitch McConnell's not being a hypocrite. He said this. I said that's the most acid. First of all, the argument's absurd in any context. It's absurd for us to make it now, but we're saying McConnell made it, so we're going to live by that same rule, right? That's the whole idea of invoking it now.
We'd like to.
You're elected president. You're elected president for a term. You're elected in the Senate. You're elected as Senate for the term. You don't lose your powers in the last 3 months. It's ridiculous. But that was the argument he made, and he made it for the presidency being over. But he didn't mean the Senate. What do you mean he didn't mean the Senate? The Senate has a constitutional role. How can you argue this applies only to presidential elections when you can read it, Aaron Blake, it's right in the Constitution. It says the Senate shall have advice and consent on these nominations.
Yes.
If elections matter, and we're at the very tail end of these things, how could it not matter for Senate elections? It makes no sense.
No, it doesn't. And, of course, you're going to see...
that's why they get away with it, because people like Aaron Blake let them get away with it. That is as much as the problem is anyway. And the problem is Democrats care what Aaron Blakes think, and Republicans don't. We have to stop caring what they think.
Yeah, that's a good part of it. And let me go back to this article I was talking about in terms of Pleasantville and the distress of the privileged.
Okay.
It's got a line in here that I've also talked about at times. The way I put it is that the basic differences between men and women, men are motivated by shame and women are motivated by safety. And this is not my formulation. This is a long-standing sort of thing by the anthropologists and anthropsychologists and so on and so forth. The article points out the way Margaret Atwood put it is Margaret Atwood is supposed to have summed up the gender power differential like this: men are afraid women will laugh at them. Women are afraid men will kill them. Now,
yes,
when you're talking about Roe v. Wade and you see the reactions of people online, as soon as a man, starts to say, well, it's really not a good idea. We have to defend Roe v. Wade because, it's important. And the women are going to say, dude, shut up and just frickin' fix this. You don't understand.
I get you.
We've had people who have been in the hospital. We know people who have died over this. This is not something to have a little argument about whether or not it's procedurally correct or incorrect. Stop it. Well, the problem is we're relatively powerless. And we don't want people to, pick on us for that because men feel shame. But the fact of the matter is we don't have the votes. So what do? Sometimes you have to go down to the mat anyway. That gets back to what I was saying before. But the differential here between the way men like Aaron Blake look at what's going on and think it's all a game, or Chuck Todd, who the other day was lamenting the fact that, with this Anthony Kennedy thing, it's really going to be a difficult summer because everybody's going to be mad at me on both sides. He wrote that. He wrote that.
Right. And wrote,
and people wrote back and say, dude, people's lives are at stake here. What the F is wrong with you? It's not about you and whether or not your summer is ruined. It's about whether people die.
Well, that's for sure. Even when he actually considered or thought he was considering the politics of it, that he pondered aloud, like, gee whiz, it's going to be fascinating to see how McConnell defends this tweet in which he laid out his made-up rule about
his hypocrite tweet, right?
Yeah, it's not going to be fascinating to see, and you should be. I guess if it's the only thing that can motivate Chuck Todd, you should be furious because this thing which you think is going to be fascinating. Like, you think politics is really super interesting and intricate to watch and try and divine what's happening.
It's a game to you, and it actually involves people's lives, and that's what folks wrote back.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge
and
problem.
What I'm going to circle back to,
I'm going to say it's not even a game.
You look at somebody like Ocasio-Cortez, and you scratch your head and say, "Gee, I wonder why and how she won." Hello, why are so many women running? Why are so many women winning? Because you know what? This is like a gut issue here.
Yeah. It's
not a game.
It seems like that may never change Chuck Todd's mind. No, it's still a game. Okay, fine. We can't change your mind. You're never going to wake up to the reality of things. You should be angry that you're being cheated out of your game. Your game has no rules. And if it doesn't have any rules, it's not a game.
Rules? I'll give you some rules. Why don't you have Katie Tur or Casey Hunt to meet the press?
Okay.
There's a new rule.
Oh, right. That would be a hell of a rule. Oh, well, no, but that's not. Yeah, okay. I'm sure you would be upset about it. But if you like the gaming aspect of it, and then you find out, no, I'm going to cheat, or you thought this was the rule. Oh, you thought you could hold me to a position because shame and hypocrisy, or because it was really even a rule. And sometimes when it really is a rule, that I wouldn't break it. Yeah, you're following the wrong thing. You thought that.
No, But you know what they do. We've seen them do this, and this is one of the things that aggravates me so much. Because what will happen is that Republicans will change the rule, and then the Aaron Blakes of the world and the Chuck Todds will say, look at this. They cheated and won. Isn't that great?
Yep.
Well, there's that too. I don't know why it doesn't upset them, though, that they to find out that it really isn't that thing they said they enjoyed so much. But I guess they enjoy watching people break the rules and say, boy, that was bold. I don't know why somebody doesn't just pick up the damn ball
who
in
won
the
the week
World Cup.
In Washington? It's the guy who cheated and won. It's the guy who killed everybody but won.
That's exactly what they've said, and they're not wrong.
I guess.
Well, if you look at winning, they're not wrong. Mitch McConnell isn't wrong because he did win.
He won. David.
Yes.
You have told Democrats this since 2005, in my experience. You're letting them play by different rules. You're following rules that they're not following.
Yes.
Why are you doing that? So that Aaron Blake says something nice about you, he's still not going to say anything nice about you. So that Chuck Todd says something nice about you, he's not going to say anything nice about you. There are no rules. There are no norms. There is no civility. There are no institutions. Yeah. This is my hypothetical. We are the Democrats. We just did everything that the Republicans and Mitch McConnell did. They win in 2020, and they take the Congress back. Are you telling me they would not pack the court? They would absolutely pack the court. We cannot play by that rule anymore. We have to pack the court. They will pack it back. I get that. But we need to eliminate the Supreme Court as a power in this country because that's all we have left. It is now just a Republican institution that has a government imprimatur of authenticity and legitimacy that we must remove. We must make it the FCC or the FEC, just a political spoil that changes hands every 4 years. That's what we're left with the Supreme Court. We must neutralize it.
Yep.
The Republicans would. We have to.
So how do you win on this? I'm going to finish this article on the distress of the privilege.
Well, we're not going to do it, then you do it. Just like they do.
Just like you do it. Yeah, well, you convince people to vote for your side.
With a lie.
I have to leave, so I want to just get this in before I go.
No, you don't.
The author of this article here noticed that once you grasp the concept of privileged distress, you see it everywhere. The rich feel punished by taxes. Whites believe they're the real victims of racism. Employers' religious freedom is threatened when they can't deny contraception to their employees. English speakers resent bilingualism. And so confronting the distress is tricky. And that, again, I saw this yesterday when Roe v. Wade came up for discussion and you had a male and a female discussing it online. Confronting the distress is tricky because neither acceptance nor rejection is quite right. The distress is very real, so you can't reject it outright. It just marks you as closed-minded and unsympathetic, and it never works to ask others for empathy without offering it back. So you got to be empathetic. And if you're talking about the distress of the privilege or the distress of the white guy, that's hard. You can't be letting them get away with it and compete with it. But you have to at least acknowledge it, even if you have to point out, but it's not the same scale. You can't just say, okay, well, you're wrong, Armando. You don't get votes.
I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know what gets votes anymore. I question that statement. What gets us votes? I think that we really have to go back and restudy that. And I know you've got to leave, so I'm going to let you keep talking because I get to talk.
Yeah, but the simple, easy answer in 2018, because we're talking about the Congress, is go local. That's what works.
What works is stop Trump by any means necessary. That's your message.
That's the Senate.
That's
House
luckily universal. So
no,
it works
it's everywhere.
No, it's not. You win on traffic. You don't win on stopping Trump. That's not enough. You can't do that in the House. That's how it was done in Virginia. That's how it was done in Virginia at the state level. Look at what happened.
We mouthed words. We won because we were we embodied the stop Trump vote. That's what it is. All that, I don't buy any of that.
It's not a stop Trump vote. This is a Roe v. Wade thing. It's not stop Trump. Again, you're missing the basic message here, Armando, and you're wrong about it. It is such a gut issue now because why does Kennedy matter? It's not because Trump wins. It's because of the issues that are on the table that a Kennedy replacement might change. That's not stop Trump. Only to the extent that if you stop Trump, maybe you can help those issues. Yeah, but it's the issues. Don't miss the forest for the trees.
Oh, I think you've missed the forest for the trees. So you are finally wrong today. You were right all day until now.
It was a good round, but
here's the thing on it. You're wrong about the basic, most important part of this.
Okay.
Well,
I think this election is
Ocasio-Cortez didn't beat Crowley because she was more anti-Trump than he was. That's not what happened.
Oh, come on. You can't take a race in Queens, and frankly, I do think it has something to do with
all of the races are like that. Pick a race where somebody actually won because the only reason they won is they said, I'm against Trump. Show me that race.
No. Who's going to be better at fighting Trump? Even there, you're wrong on that race. Ocasio-Cortez portrayed more of a fighter than Crowley. Crowley was the guy. I'm not saying it's true or not, but that you saw. By the way, because Crowley was a terrible politician,
he was
basically
awful.
Inherited his seat and never ran a race.
And practically didn't live in the district. I mean, there's no one reason why he lost, but I think if you have to sum it up, it's because he was a terrible candidate.
That was the main reason he lost. But you talk because I'm going to talk a lot after you leave. And I do want to give you a chance. But I understand what you're saying. I just fundamentally
at least
disagree.
There's that.
I fundamentally disagree with the idea that voters really see beyond the most basic question. And the most basic question for voters in the upcoming congressional elections is who will stand up to Trump.
That's
Now,
what's
you
most
can-
important to you. That doesn't mean it's most important to the voters. And by the way, for the listeners out there,
The
don't worry
Suffolk
about this.
University poll said that. I'm
Armando
not making
and
it
David
up.
and I have been yelling at each other like this for like 15 years. We really have.
That is a
Don't worry
lie.
about it.
I resent it. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Not
David
my
resents
turn
it,
yet.
and Armando's my brother, and I always have to tell him he's wrong. But I'm going to have to leave him make the case.
No, I'm actually going to talk. It's not fair that I get to talk about it and you don't get to respond. So we'll leave it for another day. But I will talk to David about something that I hope he agrees with me, because he's preached it for 13 years to me, and I mostly agreed. But
I
now
would be
I'm
a hypocrite
passionate
to
about it.
say
wanna
I
talk to him
don't,
about
so
it.
I'll probably try it.
Hypocritical, breaking the rules, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yes.
I might try.
You know
breaking
what?
the rules.
You're absolutely right, and there's a reason why David talks about process all the time. It's actually important, but then again, we're Democrats, so it's important to us.
Right.
No, I
we
think
can break it.
Well, I think David talks about it in a way to not let it stand in your way, to find a way to be Mitch McConnell about these rules. Understand which ones really apply, or which ones are norms, or which ones are civility, and which ones are just made up out of thin air. What are the real binding legal rules?
The one about having
That's
to
what
get to
David
work.
talks about, and that's what we
real.
need to talk about.
All right. Well, we should do that. Greg, I guess if you need to make a hasty exit, we thank you for your contribution today and all week, and hope we make it through the weekend. And
It
you're
is
still willing to
Thursday.
come
If
in
we're
on
all
Monday.
alive, we'll be back on Monday, and
Yeah.
we'll do it again, and we'll see what other disaster happened. I note in the news, by the way, that Iran is up reopening one of their nuclear plants, and there's evidence that North Korea is increasing the nuclear stuff they're doing too. So good work, Donald. Nice win.
Nuclear is
I'll
awesome.
talk to you, and we'll talk to you on Monday.
All right. We certainly hope
Take
so.
care,
Thanks.
Armando. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for talking about it.
All right. Take care, Greg. And I'm wrong now. My turn.
No, you're
Oh,
right.
I'm right. Sorry. See, I knew I was wrong right off the bat.
You're
about
more than right. You're proven.
Damn it,
You were
wow.
Cassandra years ago, and here we are.
Oh, well. That wasn't hard to
There's-
predict overall, but go ahead.
Right. At the end of the day, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I don't think that we can slow down the process for this next nomination, but most likely there's going to be, before the midterms, a replacement for Kennedy on the court, and it'll be some Gorsuch or worse too. And that's where we have. So to my way of thinking, we do all those things. You've got to set it up, and you've got to talk about McConnell breaking the rules and destroying the legitimacy of the court, and about these being Trump justices and they're illegitimate, et cetera, et cetera. But
Yes.
I'm
Gather your
sorry.
thoughts. That's all right. You can take your time to gather your thoughts.
It's something about gerrymandering came up, and I didn't understand it.
Oh.
But so my thought process is, and you'll go through it, or maybe you already have this morning. What can the Senate Democrats do, absent getting a vote from Collins,
Yeah, not much.
or Murkowski? You're not going to get those votes, and I'm not sure what any of that's about. And I guess they can slow walk it, they can do this, but in essence, what you're trying to do is highlight the illegitimacy of this process.
Yes.
And in fact, it is Mitch McConnell who has destroyed the legitimacy of the institution of the Supreme Court. And because of that, we are regretfully, but left with no choice, thanks to Mitch McConnell, going to have to add seats to the Supreme Court.
Yes. Well, at least that one was a Democratic idea, and we can safely do that. One of our greatest presidents had that as his idea, and we don't have to copy the Republicans for once in our hardball.
Right, and it's a simple process. It's a change in the Judiciary Act. You change the number in the provision for how many justices of the Supreme Court there are. The number currently is 9. It was not always 9. You just change the number in that particular thing. You obliterate the filibuster, or you either get 60 or you obliterate it, and you get 50 plus 1 in your caucus to vote for it. You get a Democratic president to sign it.
Yep.
And we put up our justices, and we jam them through. And of course, what happens is when they're back in power, they do the same thing. And then when we're back, we do the same thing. It will destroy the Supreme Court. But I don't know that we have an option. It's not like we can re-legitimize it. We can't live through You have to understand he's going to pick a 45, 50-year-old. The Gorsuch is 50.
Yeah.
Clarence Thomas is the oldest conservative justice right now. He is 69.
Yes. And
69.
I'm so proud of him. I feel like I've seen him grow up right before our very eyes.
We would have 20-something years of a extreme right-wing Supreme Court that will strike down every idea you have. Single payer, they will strike it down.
Yeah.
Anything you think is possible legislatively will not be possible.
Yeah.
I'm not talking just about Roe and gay rights and every other thing you care about. Simple economic legislation. Minimum wage. Well, that's a violation of the contract clause. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Minimum wage laws violate the Constitution.
Is what
you think it won't happen? It will happen. We cannot live with the Supreme Court as it is.
Yeah, it's just, I guess, a matter of how long it'll take for people
Let's say
who
it
are
takes
usually
10 years.
disengaged.
We have to do it.
Yeah.
They'll
Yes.
have to undo everything they do.
Oh no, I was just saying, how long will it take for ordinary disengaged Americans to realize exactly what this means? There are going to be some people who even will get through the whole Kennedy replacement battle. All of the battle lines will be drawn, the issues laid out, and people who are paying attention will make it clear exactly what it means. And there will still be people out there who, a very basic case will come up. It'll be something that everybody thinks they understand, and then we'll find out, as I say about these things, no, you're wrong. You were always, you were actually correct. It's just there was a faction of the country that thought that shouldn't be a fact, and then worked to undo it. It could be something as basic as, well, I know that when you get arrested, they have to read you your rights, and then they'll stop reading people their rights, and everyone will say, we know that case will get thrown out. I've seen it on TV every day of my life. Until 5 justices get together and say, Miranda, that was dumb. We shouldn't do that. And then that will be, I don't think a whole lot of people in this country really and truly understand that if 5 people who have the right clothing on at the time and sitting in the right place say, you don't have the right to remain silent. You don't have the right to an attorney. One will not be appointed for you if you cannot afford it. And, all of these things that we thought we understood about the way the country worked will just be, you know what? Today, starting now, that's not true anymore. But that was truth, justice, and the American way. It's been that way since forever. Well, actually, it's fairly recent, relatively speaking. It's just that it's been true for your entire life. But what good is that? I mean, who cares about your entire life, basically? I mean, 5 people have said this is not true anymore. And we told you this in high school. You just weren't paying attention. You were drawing AC/DC on your notebook, and you didn't care. I mean, okay, maybe something else now these days. What are the kids into these days? AC/DC, by the way, partially dead at this point. That's how old I am. But yeah, I mean, we told you that this was the case. You just didn't care. You wanted to get a car, whatever it was distracting you. And basic fundamental truths about America turn out to swing on. You mean just 5 people can just make it up? Well, they're not supposed to. And that's what we told you. Again, in high school. Well, they're lawyers, they're serious people, they understand this and that, and jurisprudence and the Constitution. They study and study and study like crazy. All the things you won't do, all the things you won't study, they do. They'll take care of it. They'll make sure America stays America, because everybody loves America. Well, if you get, they do, they think they do, they just have a very different idea of how it works. But really, honestly, at bottom, if all 5 of them hated America, it wouldn't make a difference. We gave them the clothes. They have the robes. That's it. That's all it takes. I mean, it's hard to get them. You aren't going to be confirmed by the Senate. I'm not going to be confirmed by the Senate. It's nothing to sneeze at. But once it's done, and honestly, once the nomination gets made, there isn't a whole lot of poking around under the hood. Why did you nominate this person? Hey, this person's crazy, or this person's not a lawyer, or this person is a lawyer, but it's George W. Bush's personal real estate attorney, or whatever. Once you get past the initial hurdle of, if you can capture the president's attention, and normally that's a hard thing to do, and get him to say, I'll live with whatever embarrassment comes from putting this name out here. That's it. You get to decide from that point on what is really true about America. And I guess people don't really understand that, and it's only becoming clear now that you might be able to get yourself nominated to the Supreme Court if you get on Fox television at the right time. He's giving out pardons like candy. I saw a guy on TV the other day. He got a parking ticket, and he was like, the meter was broken. And I'm like, that's not even right. I'm going to pardon that guy. This is the way this president operates. If you get on there, there are people out there saying he's going to name Jeanine Pirro because she plays a judge on television. And they're not wrong. He may do that. I mean, I don't know what's on his list. He says he has a list. And the rumor is that that's a list that's been prepared for him by Senate Republicans, which basically tells you that if that's true and he picks from that list, it's done. They're not going to oppose that person unless, I guess, one of the scenarios I'll hold out there as a possibility is this nominee is going to face an opposition research dump like you've never seen before, because provided people agree to fight tooth and nail. And, of course, because Donald Trump is doing the nominating, there's a pretty strong chance that, something really out of left field, like, oh, my God, this person's a pedophile. No, I mean, legitimately. We'll all say, well, that's unusual. That doesn't usually happen. That might be what does it. But, one, there'll be an oppo dump like you've never seen before. And two, you're now, of course, so we should keep this up, keep up the pressure of public shaming. You're now signing on for a lifetime appointment, starting at age 45, of public shaming until you quit. And, you'll be able to ride it out, perhaps. But this president could nominate anybody at all, and it wouldn't make a difference. We'll come back to the topic. There'll be more after this. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're on the other side of our quick 1-minute break. And good thing it was short, too, because we need to keep going on this. I mean, I think I've made my point largely about, how fragile the whole court thing really is. And I'm just to sum up, at bottom, 5 people decide, the only color you're allowed to wear from now on is purple. Well, where are you going to take your appeal to? If everybody says, Supreme Court, that's the court of last appeal. I guess we all got to throw out all our clothes and get some purple ones. And it just so happens that the only person who sells purple dye is Donald Trump. And I don't know, I guess that's not an emolument. So go for it. You're just going to have to do it. That's the reality of it. And people say, but it'll never get there. And maybe we won't be embarrassed in this particular nomination. There's still enough people on the list that Donald Trump could pick from the list and not do something totally stupid like, say, Judge Wapner. He's dead, I think. But that wouldn't stop him, for one thing. But really, to come and say, Judge Judy. Judge Judy has her fans. Bill likes Judge Judy, but not for the Supreme Court. And, he wouldn't possibly. But, I mean, we were all alive for Harriet Miers, yes? She was a joke. Even Republicans, really, knew that was a joke and that the nomination didn't last very long. But that was a supposedly serious president. I don't know why anybody would think that about George W. Bush, but clearly if you did, my opinion pages are full of people who thought George W. Bush was a serious president and Donald Trump is a joke. I'm a never Trumper. Okay, Harriet Miers. All right, so I wrote an op-ed in favor of Harriet Miers. So what? Big deal, Okay, but we're in a touchy situation to begin with, and that's just on the question of the Supreme Court, and that's only a small part of the problem, but the principle applies across the board. It says we can't do this. Let's see you make me not do it.
Ask the audience and yourself this. If this question is presented to the Trump Supreme Court that will exist after this new person is seated, well, how do you think they would answer? Here's the legal question. Is it within authority of Congress to regulate commerce among states to prohibit transportation and interstate commerce of manufactured goods, a product of a factory in which children under the age of 14 have been employed or permitted to work more than 8 hours in any day. How do you think Gorsuch votes on that question?
Well, you know what? I want to answer, although I guess I should preface it by saying, if at any point Donald Trump were to say, I don't want my beautiful grandkids working in a factory, this is an outrage, then they uphold the Commerce Clause power to regulate it. If he says, I don't know about you, but I think America went wrong the day we stopped making our kids work for a living, then there is no interstate
He's very capable of
commerce.
saying that. You don't know how he's going to come out on that question.
Right. So,
but given his own druthers, what do you think Gorsuch would say to that question?
He's, I don't know. I don't know exactly how he'd phrase it, except he'd be saying, well, I understand that there is a Commerce Clause, but this is supposed to be about, not the method of manufacture. We're not supposed to be regulating that. That's overreading the Commerce Clause. I don't know exactly how he'd approach it, but I assume if the interests align correctly and the Koch brothers say, what are you doing? I just hired 1,000 12-year-olds. Come on, give me a break. Then I guess they get that break. I don't know. I don't know that he does it if he's alone. And Kennedy, I guess, is the last person that would have said, come on, guys, that's dumb. And then they would lean on him and he would say, it's not that dumb, I guess.
It's not that dumb. And you think about it, in that he was a very strong supporter of the federalism movement in his thing. He would always say the only thing that trumped is individual liberty, but this isn't an individual liberty case. This is a state regulation point. Now, just to be clear, I'm presenting the question that was presented in the case Hammer v. Degenhardt from 1918, when the Supreme Court said that, in fact, the Interstate Commerce Clause did not empower Congress to prohibit the use of child labor.
Back in them days, pre-Depression.
But United States v. Darby Lumber in 1941 overruled Hammer v. Degenhardt. I'm telling people things that they don't think about anymore. But there was a period of time when the Supreme Court, those of us who went to law school, think of it as the Lochner era.
Yes.
Where the Supreme Court was very much telling you that you couldn't regulate this and that. And the principle that they upheld was freedom of contract.
Yeah.
Now,
and that's still
there was a freedom that the Supreme Court upheld yesterday. The freedom to not have to pay dues into your union who gets you benefits.
Yes. Right. And is forced to negotiate on your behalf even if you don't buy in.
See, they can turn these things into freedoms, liberty questions.
Yes, and when it comes time, Gorsuch can say, hey, there's precedent for this. It was overruled in the 40s, but there is precedent for it. I just have to go back further. And that's closer to the founders, so it must be more correct. I don't know what the logic necessarily will be, but they certainly have the window dressing if they want to have it. And, of course, it would be worth considering, just before I relinquish the microphone again, at the time of the latter ruling, there were almost certainly enraged conservatives who pointed out, perhaps correctly, that, hey, look, this is the system we live in. You get 5 liberal justices, and all of a sudden the Interstate Commerce Clause interpretation isn't the law anymore. They just changed their mind. This is a political institution, and we need to neutralize it. And it took them a long time, but so they did. They got together and put their heads together in a memo when it really came to a head. It didn't bother them enough, or they didn't have the power to do it in the 40s. And they got complacent in the 50s, but then, oh my goodness, well, all of the upheaval of the 60s and early 70s, which David Gergen has apparently forgotten about and now thinks of as inherently civil time, which, I don't know, that's not a bad thing that he thought that was civil, I guess, except that he's wrong now. But that was the motivating factor. They put their heads together and wrote a memo and said, how are we going to go about constructing the movement and feed the movement that it's going to take to get those 5 heads together on the Supreme Court to change the fundamental way we see things. And bit by bit, piece by piece, it did happen and did work. And I guess they thought they would get those results a little earlier, but Kennedy disappointed them from time to time, and every once in a while Roberts did. Now they'll have a backup and a 6th vote to add to things, or a reliable 5th, and they'll be in play for a 6th, and then eventually one of the other 4. And I guess we could all make odds on which one leaves next. And it's if it's in the next couple of years, then they solidify their hold forever, and kids then grow up learning in high school that you don't have the right to ban goods manufactured by children from interstate commerce, and you don't have the right to an attorney if you can't afford one, et cetera, et cetera. So, that's all it takes. And I guess there are really, really old people who say, I remember when it went the other way, and good, this is your comeuppance. And I guess if you're one of the, very few people old enough to remember that personally, then I guess you feel vindicated. But you also might not know what's going on around you.
Look, we're talking about things, and no one's going to see it that way yet. I'm just telling you, come 2020, Roe is up, and it will be. And it's struck down, and everybody's going to gnash their teeth. And,
yes, everybody here has
and
seen
be right about it.
That prediction too. And was it Jeffrey Toobin was on the TV yesterday saying in 18 months abortion will be flat illegal in 20 plus states. And I don't think anybody disagrees. Not here listening. We all think that that's likely to be the outcome. There aren't going to be. I mean, remember that if it's turned loose, the state legislatures are by far worse than anything we've got here on the national level. There's, it's crappy vetting and it fails all the time, but there's a sort of vetting that keeps the complete loons from, in general, from the national level of politics, and they hide and breed in the state and local levels. So, you're going to have, not only that, the next stage is going to be you're going to have cities saying, not only do they ban abortion, they're going to ban thinking about abortion or voting to legalize abortion. Or if you vote for Democrats, you're under arrest. Okay, we'll see about that. Well, I'll take my chances at the Supreme Court about that one while I wait 6 years in prison.
Yeah, exactly. I'll take my chances. Look, it's all going to happen to me. I mean, this isn't, okay, here's the one scenario where it doesn't. John Roberts all of a sudden decides, I can't take it there because of the institutional, I'll just start voting the other way, relying on precedent.
He heard you say we need to undermine the institutional prestige of the court. Oh, well, he's right. I will head him off at the pass.
That's your one chance. That's your one chance, and I don't have that much confidence in that chance.
Well, yeah. I mean, we can make up all sorts of various scenarios. Like I said,
but I guess that's
nominate
your chance.
A pedophile.
But here's what's going to happen. Kennedy retired, and everybody's upset. But Kennedy signed 4 of the worst decisions you'll ever read.
Okay. Yes.
This year. The Janus case is an abomination. That's the public unions thing. The gerrymandering case is so ridiculous. Look, they punted back, but come on. It's outrageous. The travel ban case, after he wrote the masterpiece, the cake baker case, is the most blatant hypocrisy in one term that I've ever seen. Well, look at what the adjudicator said. Oh, but don't look at what the president said when determining whether there was animus.
Yeah.
It's outrageous. I mean, Kennedy was awful. And we're frightened to death that he's leaving because what's coming next will be so much worse.
Yes, I was suddenly like, oh yeah, I actually feel a little bit bad. Oh no, yeah, you're right. What's coming next is worse. Yeah, although I guess there's the possibility that I won't feel worse because this will be overt and unexpected.
Maybe Ivanka will talk him into some moderate.
Yeah, she's very influential, I hear. Well, I don't know what. She'll. Who knows? I guess the things that I've seen which are somewhat interesting are like the floating of the idea of Mike Lee. I guess I don't know whether that's
as
just
a
wishful
compromise
thinking.
Moderate candidate.
And he probably he would have to almost consider that to be the case. I mean, versus say Jeanine Pirro, which is I really do think he might be serious about that, and he might try that later.
They have their 25 list, and I'm not familiar with the list off the top of my head. I
assume there's 24
familiar when the Gorsuch time was coming up. I'd have to reread it, but it's some Gorsuch. They've got 50 Gorsuches out there.
Yes, they don't need to do anything ludicrous to excite.
They'll
the
say,
base.
"Look, he went to Harvard. And he's been on the
Brett
circuit court of
Kavanaugh's
whatever
another
for 15 years, and the APA gives it its highest rating, and all the same nonsense you hear every one of these times." I don't care about his rating. I don't care about how smart he is. I need to know how he's going to vote.
Yes, and he won't tell you.
And he won't tell me.
And you might as well just start saying he.
I don't need to know your philosophy. You're a vote. You're a freaking vote. None of you people are convincing each other or persuading each other. It's a bunch of nonsense. How are you voting? You're like a senator. You're just a political actor. And we need to understand that institution is what it is. And it now has 6, not just Republicans, but Freedom Caucus Republicans are going to be on it. Or 5, rather. Okay, 4 plus Roberts, who plays the... Who would Roberts be in this context? Paul Ryan? Yeah, I think Paul Ryan's a good example.
All right.
He's the guy that looks pretty, and they liked him, and he was a faker, but he's really just as crazy as they are.
Okay.
Think of Roberts as Paul Ryan, Thomas is Matt Gaetz, Gorsuch is Louis Gohmert. I mean, I'm talking about how they vote.
Okay.
I'm not saying he's that dumb, but he's going to vote the way those guys vote.
Okay. Yes.
And then Alito is he's Ted Cruz, I guess, but
you think? Louis Gohmert.
You really got to start thinking of these people that way.
Yeah, that's
and ours too. Who's the you love Sotomayor, so she's Ted Kennedy now, or Ginsburg was Ted Kennedy. The liberal lions, and then Breyer's the Adam Schiff type. They're just politicians.
Yeah. And that's not out of bounds by itself.
Well, it is what it is. Maybe it is out of bounds, but my thinking it's out of bounds means what? It is what it is. The question is, what do we do? Because it's going to happen. And I assume they're going to do it before the election, because I sort of get the feeling they feel like if they get wiped out, they can't really. They're going to have they won't be able to jam it through on a lame duck.
Right.
I don't think.
Well, I mean, they can, and then they probably would try and do that. I doubt very much that they would just simply not do it, unless, I don't know, if Mitch McConnell's just tired and he's like, I'm going to be in the minority, screw this guy. I don't like Trump anyway, I'm just going to coast, I guess. But, you're right. I mean, they will try. They've said as much. They want to get it done right away because it's only fair to do it quickly. And I know hypocrisy. We get you. You're right. Won't matter to them. So they want to do it right away, do it quickly. There was a lot of, opinionating back and forth about, well, is that good for them electorally or bad for them electorally to try to do it before the election? I don't know if they care. They want this thing done. I don't know if they really are super concerned if they get wiped out in Congress so long as they have a majority on the Supreme Court. They think they can get anything they want done. Between, an autocrat, crazy idiot president and an autocratic, crazy idiot Supreme Court, you could afford to get wiped out in Congress. It won't make a great deal of difference. A Democratic Congress will have everything vetoed, and if they manage to override a veto, and nobody is predicting those kind of wins for us. I mean, you should remember that I take a wild guess at how Donald Trump learns to use his veto crayon with a Democratic Congress. Doesn't matter what they pass, doesn't matter how overwhelmingly popular it is. If he gets it in his head, if somebody tells him, they don't have anything near the numbers on party line votes to override your veto, he'll just veto everything, and then he'll spend his days claiming everyone in Congress should resign because they're ineffective. Well, what do you mean ineffective? You're vetoing everything. They can't get anything passed, they should resign. Why are we paying these guys? He'll be tweeting about 225 angry Democrats wanted this thing passed in the House. Oh, so what? Big deal. There are 54 angry Democrats in the Senate. Who cares? And then, what if they impeach you? Well, not with 54, they won't. I mean, they'll impeach me. They won't be able to remove me. So veto, 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 veto. And not only will you never be able to override my veto, but I think you should take the bill back up again and pass my version of it, or I'm going to kidnap your daughters, and I'm not going to tell you where I'm imprisoning them.
Yeah.
You can't. I did. But you shouldn't. Right. It's done.
And then you go to the Supreme Court, and newly minted Justice Kavanaugh will vote with Gorsuch and Roberts and say, well, yes, the president showed animus, and maybe this was a little out of line, but he's the president.
Yep. Adam Bonin already talking about Kavanaugh and pointing out where others are talking about Kavanaugh. I guess what's he got here? University of Chicago law professor. He is quoting Todd Henderson, who has this to say: Brett Kavanaugh was my boss at Kirkland and Ellis. He is brilliant, thoughtful, kind, and a patriot. He will make a legendary associate justice. And tweets an article along with that. Adam, right on top of it, this is true, and we'll tell everybody it's the truth. It won't stop anybody. But he's already publicly opined on whether the president can be criminally indicted, and has argued that the president is empowered to curtail independent investigations of himself. Screenshot of the argument in which he lays that out, but take his word for it. That's what he says.
All right. I would demand that he recuse himself from any questions on that because of his previously stated opinions. Would he agree to do so? Otherwise, I must vote no.
Yes, right. I mean, that's the way you handle it, and then you lose.
I know, and he's still going to get confirmed,
right,
but that's what you do.
That is what you do. You are absolutely correct. Well, here you go. We all demanded that Scalia recuse himself from a number of cases in important instances where he had, it didn't work, but he died. So maybe there's magic involved here. Kavanaugh will smother himself with a pillow in Texas, and we'll have enough. Then we'll get Judge Pirro after that. No, we should absolutely resuscitate him and keep him on a ventilator because who knows what will come next, Democrats will say. Sure. And we're going to have a justice on life support. Although that
Trump
would
doesn't care about the court. And while sometimes he likes his Judge Judys of the world, sorry, Bill, Judge Pirros and Judge Napolitanos and all that stupid stuff.
Well, he
doesn't care enough to actually get into it with anybody about that. And the people
he's
around
willing to sign that over.
You can't do that. You have to get one of our people, otherwise we're going to revolt. And I think they're serious about it. They will not take a Judge Pirro. It makes a mockery of who they are, and they don't want that.
I think largely certainly won't be the first one out of the box. If he has 6 votes and somebody else dies, falls out of a window, gets polonium poisoning, they may say, okay, as a parting gift, you can have, whatever, Justice Ivanka, whatever makes you happy, sure. Once we have a real solid base of actual people who are said to be judges by others besides you, Mr. President, I guess you could have a parting gift. And I guess we'll find out who that is after Trump meets the puppet master in Helsinki, which is coming up next. That in the news. Oh, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
Yes, okay.
Can I take just 2 minutes to just finish up something? Because
you better, because otherwise
I really just want, because I know you'll need to go to other subjects after the next break, because I can't monopolize this. But this whole application of norms and civility and rules, and you just don't do that. It doesn't apply to anybody but us. We played that game probably stupidly, but this is really it. You've got to decide, because all this is going to happen. And when I say decide, I don't mean decide today. This is going to be a multi-year process, maybe 10-year process, whereby we have to steel our nerve and steal our electorate and just tell the media, we don't care what you're saying. This is it. This Supreme Court, and it may wait till there's Roe is struck down, because I understand that one. But it's going to be 8 or 5 or 10 different issues where everything you care about as a progressive will be foreclosed. I'm telling you right now, that court will tell you can't do single payer. Someone will come up with some cockamamie legal argument like they did for the Affordable Care Act and tell you why you can't do it. All the things you think matter will be foreclosed if you let the composition of this Supreme Court stand.
Yeah.
Again, I repeat, the oldest conservative is Clarence Thomas, who is 69. Gorsuch is 50. The next one will be 45 or something. You can see them. They're not dying tomorrow.
Yeah. Though,
this is
they
it.
could tweak their diet.
We have to remake this, and we have to smash the norms that they try to impose on us. And if we're uncivil, or if we offend Aaron Blake or Ruth Marcus or Chuck Todd or the New York Times editorial board, that's the price we got to pay. And obviously we need the support of the people to do that. Hopefully they care about it and see it the way we do. But that's really what it's going to take. And it's not going to happen tomorrow, and it's not going to happen in the next 4 months. It's something that, we really couldn't even think about till 2021 anyway. So I'm talking about 3 years from now. You need to understand what the stakes are. And people need to start talking about it now, so that when Roe does get overturned, you say, yeah, those guys are right. I was a little reluctant, but they're right. Now we got to do it.
Yes.
Someone has to open up, as the cliche says, the Overton window. They talk about abolish ICE, which doesn't make sense to me, short term or long. This is a real thing with real consequences and a real policy and political approach we must adopt. I hope that, again, I'm building on your work, in my view, of the many years of constitutional hardball and understanding that they don't play by the rules the way we do and what our real legal constraints are. We're not going to break the law. We're going to follow the law, but we're not going to follow their rules anymore.
Well, it's a long time coming, and it's going to be absolutely necessary. By the way, it occurred to me as you were laying out some of the options, if they really, I guess if I were advising the other side, which I'm not, but if I was smart, I would, because I'd be very, very wealthy, and I'd get everything I wanted. I'd feel dead inside, but that's okay. I actually kind of feel a little bit dead inside right now, so it's no loss. But if I wanted to give them a brilliant play, let them replace Kennedy. Suppose they come back next week, having replaced Kennedy that quickly, and say, you know what, we should pack the Supreme Court. And people would say, what do you need to pack? You already own the Supreme Court. What do you need that for? I don't know. Why not? We know that Democrats right now are saying we need to start moving the Overton window right now, and it's absolutely true. I'm not, denying that that's true. We're making fun of the idea. That is one of the better options out there. We won't have any opportunity to do it yet, but suppose they just start saying, well, all the Democrats say that they're going to pack the Supreme Court, but and then we'll pack it right back. But that's okay. What if we pack it first? Will Democrats attempt to pack it again? Are we going to have 64 justices by the time this is all done? Or will it look too ridiculous? Will Democrats back away and say, no, this is outrageous. We now have 12 justices. We can't possibly, if we propose to go to 15, that won't do anything. It's been that heavily packed. And 2, they already did it. They're going to say we're copying, and that's bad. We learned that in grade school. I wonder about that. If I were them, I'd start packing the Supreme Court, I guess. Look out for that. Please erase this podcast.
I realize my idea destroys the institution. I understand that, okay? But I'm saying it's necessary. I really do.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com.
And trees made or which shall be made under their authority. I don't know.
We've been reading the Constitution to one another during the break. We are back now. Welcome back to the show. And you know the show you're listening to. You know what station it's on. I did a little My Cousin Vinny homage there, but I'm gonna do the rest of the show as in character. So can we do that? I think we can. Can you do? How's your Joe Pesci?
Terrible.
Oh,
terrible.
Right,
I'd have to. I could work on it. But I'll have to practice and come back for that one. And I could do a better Fred Gwynn. I think doing a Southern Louisiana guy.
Oh, okay. I might be able to actually do a what's her name? I can't even remember now. The co-star, Marissa. What's her name? What's her last name? Tomei. That's it. Correct. Yeah, she does a fantastic job.
Mona Lisa something.
Yes, Mona Lisa Vito. That I remember. What's her real name? I don't know.
Marissa Tomei.
Yes, that's correct. Okay.
She was on A Different World.
Right.
She went,
oh, my goodness.
She won the Oscar.
We can do the rest of the thing.
Best Supporting Actress.
And she was fantastic. Was it for My Cousin Vinny? It should have been. Probably not. Not an Oscar contender?
I believe it was for My Cousin Vinny.
Oh, good. Well, fantastic. No.
I'll have to look that up.
The defense is wrong. All right. Let's proceed. Let's wrap things up. We know that, things could get very horrible. We are aware of this. The Republicans will do anything they want. They may, in fact, what if they just steal our playbook and say, to hell with this, we'll pack the Supreme Court. We'll put Justices 10, 11, and 12 on there this year because we want to. We'll vote to expand the court now while we can and while our best loyalists are still part of the Congress. And everybody who doesn't campaign on, yes, that's awesome, will lose because Trump will campaign against you. And then we'll hand the Congress over to Democrats. But don't worry, they won't be able to undo our expansion because Trump will veto all of it. And then we'll just sit here and enjoy ourselves for the next 4 years and own the libs by watching them burn out as they're unable to do anything in Congress.
I mean that sums it up. I do think that that I've always wanted to make clear that I have no expectation that the institution of the Supreme Court will survive as a legitimate entity. All of these things in it, but I think for us it's better that we have an empty Supreme Court with no authority that basically is reversing itself every 4 years, saying, "Oh yeah, you passed that. Well, I just overturned your precedent. You overturned Roe v. Wade. Well, I just overturned your overturning." And then they do the same thing, and it's the Starberry Sneetches thing. You just go around and around. that's better than just, oh, well, this is a very legitimate, authoritative Supreme Court that just decided that you can't ban child labor. So, what are you going to do? That's they spoke, they pronounced from on high. Yeah,
Right.
That's worse. Okay. So I'd rather destroy the Supreme Court than let Clarence Thomas be the voice of reason on the Supreme Court.
Yeah. I guess that's
Okay.
as valid as any.
Okay. And my final word for the day is that, in fact, Marissa Tomei did win the Oscar
terrific.
for My Cousin Vinny. And her latest film appearances were
I
as
did.
Aunt May in Spider-Man Homecoming last year.
I did not watch that one, but I knew she was in it. That's amazing.
All right, so I leave you with those pleasant thoughts of
They're important.
Marissa Tomei.
Gotta cling to whatever I
Aunt
can.
May.
Yeah,
and
that was
Spider-Man.
kind of sad, actually. So you know how women age out of Hollywood pretty quick, and quite honestly, My Cousin Vinny was a horrible mismatch. What was the age difference between her and Joe Pesci at that point?
Oh my God,
that was horrific. That was like Roy Moore. They should have arrested him on the set.
It was something. But anyway, she was actually
maybe I misunderstand.
Much too young to be Aunt May. Let's be honest. But
yes, but it was a pleasure to see.
They recast the character.
Yes. Oh, it was a gritty reboot of Aunt May.
It was a gritty. No, you're the more hipper.
Yes.
Still lively Aunt May. But there was also an Aunt May in the different series where it was Sally Field.
Oh yeah. And
which was also kind of weird, but at least closer in age.
Yes.
But
anything
anyway,
to distract myself.
Now that I've ruined your morning, I'll let you talk about how Trump is going to stand up to Russia now.
Yes, that's good. He's very strong. Right.
He's very strong. He respects me, man.
Yeah.
He respects me. I can't do Trump's voice, but you watch and see. That's how he's going to go. Anyway, I'll let you go and hand you back your show.
All right.
Please
for all the good it does.
Understand that I do think we have to break all the rules now.
Okay.
Because they only apply to us.
Understood.
Okay.
All right.
To you later.
Well, yes. Talk to you soon, and we'll see. There's still another day of the show going on here, so we'll be able to keep up to date on whatever the latest developments are and whether other names get floated. So far, we're seeing Kavanaugh, would be horrible at the end. Mike Lee, sure, would be horrible. Might even save to the extent that I'm a libertarian and I believe in yada yada, and he might do something surprising once in a while. Maybe that's not the worst thing in the world. Creates an interesting opportunity, by the way, since we're breaking all the rules. Were they to nominate Mike Lee, maybe the thing to do. Well, look, you don't jump out of the way. You got to fight. That creates an interesting pressure because there's a tradition, and I don't know why anybody should honor this tradition. I am arguing you should break all the rules. You should certainly break tradition. But there's a long tradition of, we've nominated one of our own. We love our own. Senators are awesome people, even if they are crap senators from the other side and have ruined my life every day I've worked here. But we respect one another, unless it's Mark Sanford, in which case let's let Trump, give him a wedgie in front of the conference. And there were some people that booed, but then there were some people that came out there and said, no, it was awesome. We loved it. So you tell me what's happening there. But in other words, it's possible that there would be a number of Democrats, and they might really want this on the Republican side. We want to nominate Mike Lee because we think we'll get, some number of Democratic votes, maybe even a lot. No one really knows. Anyway, fine, good, go ahead and do it. No danger to them because the governor gets to appoint his replacement, and we all know, how that process works and who the governor is. Well, we don't know who the governor is, but we know what party the governor comes from, and we have very little doubt, therefore, that a Republican would be appointed by the governor of Utah to replace Mike Lee in the Senate. Here's what I'm saying. If they do this really quickly, we've been talking about, we haven't been talking about this, but everybody has spent yesterday afternoon talking about it off the show. What happens? What are the dynamics? What are the numbers in the Senate? And it's worth reminding everybody it is 51-49 Republican majority in the Senate. And like I said yesterday, we could do a whole show about whether or not that's a fair thing. It isn't. It's crazy. There's millions more people voting for Democratic senators than there are Republican senators. And yes, you can gerrymander both the Senate and the Electoral College by admitting states with, 6 people in them and giving them 2 senators, et cetera, et cetera. But 51-49 as it stands. John McCain not available to actually vote, but still hanging on to his seat. And at this point, I mean, it wouldn't make any difference whether he did or didn't in terms of the Republican ownership of that seat, because once again, a replacement would be appointed by a Republican governor of Arizona. And at this point, you should be sending John McCain vitamins to keep him alive, if that will help. Only because that seat, the best thing you can do right now with that seat is leave it unused, which is what's happening. And I'm sure that eventually, Donald Trump hates John McCain just as much as anybody. And I'm sure he wants that seat vacated so that he can fill it with a reliable Republican vote. But like I said, this creates a very weird, unique situation. It is 51-49 Republicans, but John McCain never shows up to cast that 51st vote. That doesn't make a practical difference right now for most things, because they still have 50 and we still have 49, and 50 is a majority and beats 49. But that's one vote away. If you could somehow, on any given subject, and on the Supreme Court nomination, it's very unlikely that you would shift the vote, but on some things, there's a couple of senators that occasionally say, rah, 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 no, I'm going to stand in opposition, like John McCain did before he, went back home to, do his best to fight his illness and live out his days. There were a few situations where things famously went against Republicans in the Senate. With one of them gone, it's 50-49. And if one other of them who's healthy and voting flips, or for that matter, stubs his toe and doesn't make it to the floor in time, it's 49-49. It's still not a problem, because they just hold the vote open and they call Mike Pence, who isn't doing anything anyway, and say, come over here and be our 50th vote, and that solves things. And that will come up again later. We'll discuss a little bit about that. But that's what I'm saying about Mike Lee. Go ahead. Nominate him to the Supreme Court. We can't stop him. Whatever he goes, right? And now it is, instead of 51-49 with John McCain ill, 50-49, and Mike Lee moving to the Supreme Court, it is now 49-49 briefly, right? And we all expect that the governor of Utah moves with all dispatch and sends us a replacement for Mike Lee in very short order, maybe timed so that it actually arrives, his documentation, his appointment to the seat arrives in the Senate just as Mike Lee finally resigns, so that there's a gap of only seconds. And I assume that they'd be ready to do that. Whether or not they actually engineer it that way, they probably think it doesn't matter very much. And ultimately, it probably won't matter very much. But for a brief second, you'll now have a 50-49 Senate with one Republican known to be absent due to illness, John McCain. Effectively a 49-49 Senate. But again, who cares, because Mike Pence is just hanging around with nothing to do. So effectively, you're still back to 50-49. But there are some questions. There are some questions about what sorts of votes the president of the Senate, the vice president of the United States, can and can't break. There's no precedent, for instance, in some cases for a vice president being counted on a tiebreaker vote on certain issues. However, that doesn't matter. They'll simply say, let us establish that precedent. There is that. But, make them do it, whatever. The bigger issue in combination, I guess, with all of this is that on average, it is actually a relatively rare thing. I mean, it happens all the time. It's not like, oh my God, I've never seen an example of it. But the vast majority of roll call votes taken in the Senate have more than one absence. I think, well, I've got an article here somewhere that actually puts the average as something like about 1.8. So it's usually 2 people plus absent for whatever reason. Sometimes it's simply missing the vote because they were across town, but sometimes it's something more involved, and it's sometimes a rotating cast of characters, and sometimes senators fall ill but then recover and come back. The problem, or the point, I guess, is that it's dangerously close to not having a functioning majority every once in a while in the Senate, and in ways that Mike Pence himself might not even be able to fix, and you are much, much closer to it if you take a Republican out of the Senate Republican Conference and send him to the Supreme Court, even though a replacement is coming. If the replacement arrives at the right moment and Mike Lee leaves, but John McCain is at home, and you have effectively 49 Republicans there and 49 plus, 47 Democrats plus the 2 independents. So it's effectively 49, and Pence is still around. And those credentials arrive for Mike Lee's replacement. Don't just stand there and assume that everything is signed properly. Don't just stand there and assume the appointment has been properly made and that it's a ministerial function at this point for the Democrats in the Senate to simply say everything appears to be in order and swear in the replacement. Now, they will do that, but they shouldn't do that. And this gets us back to very similar play to the one I hypothesized as being possible, and we caught a lot of flack for it, but it still checks out. There's really still nothing solid that says it wouldn't have worked at the beginning of this Congress while Joe Biden was still vice president. And don't forget, the founders did this. They staggered the handover on purpose. I mean, we've changed the dates since then, but it was always meant to be the case that the old administration carried through during the installation of the new Congress. While Joe Biden was still vice president of the United States, and the terms of the senators, even those who had won re-election, the terms expired and they were awaiting the ministerial functions of being sworn in to their new terms. At that moment, there was an overwhelming Democratic majority of senators continuing in office. You remember how we explained this thing. And they could have, had they, had the guts. And I mean, this was beyond any senator I've ever known in history at any point. No Democratic senator or liberal-leaning senator, if you need to borrow from previous eras, where the modern Democratic and Republican parties are less relevant. There's just never been a senator that I'm aware of on the liberal-leaning side who had the guts to pull off a maneuver like this. It would have been hardball times a million. Nuclear, was already the nuclear option. So beyond nuclear somehow. I don't even know what you would be able to come up with to describe how outrageous this would have been. But it's very, you could have pulled that off, and we've been pointing to things in books and constitutions and just making plain old power arguments and saying, well, what are you going to do about it? And there really was nothing obvious other than having a fist fight and declaring the winner of the fist fight the king of the Senate and figuring out from that point, what do you do in a situation like that? We don't know how it would have come out. Hopefully you remember that I described the situation. What the parallel would be now is you've got 49, if there's full attendance, 49 Republicans in the Senate present and ready to vote, and no chance of getting that 50th one back from Arizona, and he might not even have any inclination to come back even if they prevailed on him to do so. Who knows? But then again, he might get on a plane and ruin the whole thing. It's a long shot, is what I'm saying. It's a long shot. There we go. Marissa Tomei helping me out with the accent. But he's at home. He's ill. There are 49 Republicans in the chamber, 49 Democrats in the chamber, and one of a couple things could happen. One could be in comes the replacement senator, duly appointed, of course, by the governor of Utah, and the secretary of the Senate announces that there's they've received a message in writing from the honorable whoever the hell it is now, governor of the state of Utah, and announces that they have the credentials of the new senator at the desk. At which point you just make stuff up. Reserving the right to object, Mr. President, and they're speaking to the president of the Senate, and maybe they get word of it and they worry about it and they bring in Mike Pence. But you start just making objections. I don't know that this is in regular order. It doesn't matter. Make it up. You make a conspiracy theory. I think the Russians sent this, whatever it is. You just throw something out just for the sake of starting a couple of, arguments, delay things for a little bit. But really, honestly, what if you just fight tooth and nail and say, no, this appointment is out of order? Well, oh my God, the implications. Why they'll do that to the next Democrat who Yes, they will. Things will go crazy. It's going to be horrible forever. But guess what? It's going to be horrible forever if you don't do this, but it will have, it'll have the look and feel of legitimate action if you let it go on that way. However, if you fight tooth and nail about it, I'm not certain that it settles in as legitimate action, what the court does later and what we have to live with later. This president hadn't really settled in entirely as legitimate yet, and it's largely because of continuing resistance and unwillingness to believe in his legitimacy, and I encourage you to keep not believing in his legitimacy. But you have that fight. I don't know that these papers are in order. We make something up. I want some sort of process by which we can verify that it's the signature of the governor of Utah, because I don't know what that signature looks like. That only lasts so long. Or you can say, I think he was brought. It doesn't matter really what your issue is. Make something up. Say, I don't believe that person believes that the breakfast he had at All American is the best breakfast he ever ate, and he should demand his money back because he's not 100% satisfied. Anything you could come up with. Call roll call votes. I object. Well, there's nothing to object to. Well, I object to your not believing there's anything you object to. I want to vote on it, whatever it is, and eventually they'll have to vote to shut you up more than anything else. Well, I'm going to invoke cloture on your question about the fake objection you have to this senator's credentials. Oh, yeah? Well, put it to a vote. Because right now it's 49-49. Well, who cares? Because we have Pence, he'll break the tie. Now, there's some question about whether or not he can vote on every single thing that should come before the Senate. But he will, claim that right, and there'll be very little we can do about it. However, should it happen at a moment when some other Republican has stubbed his toe, well, now you got a real problem, because there's 48 of them in the chamber and 49 of us, and Mike Pence is busy and he's, or he's abroad or whatever. There are going to be moments where you can actually create a gigantic crisis. Now, there's going to be moments where you can't, but you can waste an hour, 2 hours, but put high drama on television, if you consider C-SPAN 2 to be television, and have those fights. And some of those fights are just worth it to rally the base. And there are a number of other things. Now, there's also an article out here. I guess this is how I should really wind things up for the day. Gregory Kroger has written for Vox, and as you know, anything that's on Vox will explain it all. But I'll help. How Democrats can shut down the Senate. And he's not suggesting that we do this during the credentialing of any Mike Lee replacement, because it doesn't matter. This could be done at any point. If Democrats refuse to participate in roll call votes, the Senate will come to a halt for lack of a quorum. This is basically true. There are many problems with it, but it is basically true, and it should be regarded as true, and it should be implemented as though we believe it's true. I'll tell you what the problems are, hopefully, along the way. He writes, and he is a professor, I believe, at Miami, University of Miami. Can we verify that before I even go on? Is that really the most important part of the article? It is not. Let's go. Let's say Democrats want to shut down the center. He means the Senate, I think, in order to force a vote on one of their own proposals. For example, a bill to prevent the federal government from separating parents and children as they seek asylum at our nation's borders. They can do it anytime they want. Let me explain. Let us say that it is something else. Let us say it is the credentialing of Mike Lee's replacement. Let us say it is this vote on putting anyone on the Supreme Court. I'll add that to the pile. In order for the Senate to do anything, there must be a sufficient number of members present. Article 1, Section 5 of the Constitution states a majority of each, that's 51, a majority of each shall constitute a quorum to do business. But a smaller number may adjourn from day to day, and this is where some of the problems arise, and may be authorized, this is the problem, to compel the attendance of absent members in such manner and under such penalties as each house may provide. That's a big problem. We'll come back to it. Other than quitting for the day or calling for others to come to the chamber, the Senate can do nothing without a majority of its members, 51 senators, participating in a vote. No bill can pass, no amendment can be decided on, no nominations can get approved. P.S. No credentials can be accepted and no senators may be sworn in. At present, it would be extremely difficult for Republicans to provide a quorum with their own numbers. Their majority, as we pointed out, stands at 51-49, with Senator John McCain on extended leave in Arizona. If no Democrat participates, the Republicans cannot provide a quorum. Asterisk. Down at the bottom, the asterisk brings up the next problem right away. I'm uncertain, he says, whether Vice President Mike Pence could contribute to a 51st vote toward a quorum. The Senate precedents on quorums do not mention this question, and so there is no answer, and so they will make up their own answer. That's the short answer to whether or not there's an answer. They'll say, yeah, sure, the Vice President can. In the month of June, there have been an average of 1.8 Republican absences across 18 roll call votes. So, even if McCain returned to the Senate, the majority would struggle to consistently provide a floor majority. This provides Senate Democrats with real leverage. If they refuse to participate in roll call votes, the Senate will come to a halt for a lack of a quorum. The problem is, how do they deal with it? This tactic would put pressure on every Republican to be near the chamber whenever the Senate is in session, and Democrats are able to force a vote on any procedural question. And by the way, any point during debate that anybody utters, I suggest the absence of a quorum, you got to produce 51, unless somebody gets unanimous consent to suspend with the quorum call. But there you have it. If Republicans are busy in the morning raising money and holding committee meetings, Democrats can force them into the Senate chamber and keep them there. The same is true during peak fundraising time in the early evening, or if the Senate is in session on Friday, or during the month of August. Meanwhile, vulnerable Senate Democrats will be doing their part by staying out of the Senate chamber and using their time more productively. This would be a confrontational tactic. The Senate Democrats would probably only use it to make a fundamental point about the Senate's role in American democracy, and at that point, should be that the Senate must be an institution where there is free and open debate so the majority can rule. Blah, 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 yada, yada. And, this is an important part too, but we have to skip over it because it's the end of the show. At present, there are several critical bills kept from the Senate floor by McConnell's policy of basically steering debate. And all these things are very important and everything, but we need to skip over them and just basically lay this out there. For instance, if they were to have hearings on a replacement for Kennedy, you could interrupt those hearings at any point by sending a Democrat to the floor and having he or she utter the words, "I suggest the absence of a quorum," and then running away. They would have to stop the hearing if no Democrats went to the floor to answer the quorum call. The Senate will has to adjourn if they cannot produce that quorum, and it will be up to Republicans to try to produce it, and that means they will have to stop their hearings. They'll come right back to them, but what if you do this literally 15, 16, 20 times a day? Eventually they'll say, you know what, to hell with the hearings. We don't even need the hearings. Let's just go straight to the nomination vote. They have the power to do that too. And they'll have their fights in the committee, and they can force it through, yes. And they can eventually force anything through. And by the way, We know that the filibuster is gone on judicial appointments. One thing that Democrats can do along the way, though, remember that nominations are held in or considered in executive session of the Senate. You don't just automatically find yourself in executive session when you need it. It's a motion to go to executive session, and you can call for a vote on the motion to proceed to executive session, and you can vote against it. And quite honestly, if there were Republicans of conscience that you thought might try to get in the way of this nomination, but you thought that they were afraid to vote against the nominee for various reasons, you could suggest to them that technically you could just vote no on motions to proceed to executive session, which would prevent them from taking up the nomination in the first place. You can't usually, if you structure it right, you can't filibuster a motion to go to executive session, but you can vote no on it. And if you're too afraid to vote no on the nominee, but you still want to gum up the works, well, that's an option that's out there. We'll continue to discuss this and other crazy options out there tomorrow, because tomorrow's Friday, and we'll be back to discuss this yet again. It ain't going away.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, it ain't going away, and neither are all the other fantastic issues that need discussing, including the fact that there's a showdown now between protesters and police in the Occupy ICE fight that's going on in Portland. Do we have it correct? I'm sorry we didn't get to that. And all of the other fantastic things you'll have to depend on Justice to bring you next.